They seemed invisible, untouchable. But the mistake that ended their reign didn't come from an investigator's intuition or a surveillance camera. It came from an ordinary man in an ordinary town who picked up the phone. October 22nd, 2002. The FBI had finally connected the dots between the D.C. shootings and a murder in Montgomery, Alabama. A fingerprint lifted from a magazine at that scene identified Lee Boyd Malvo, age 17. But Malvo didn't exist in a vacuum. He had once lived in a homeless shelter in Tacoma, Washington, under the supervision of a man named John Allen Muhammad. The shelter director remembered them well. Muhammad had called Malvo his son, though they were unrelated by blood. Their bond was odd, obsessive, intense, and isolated from others. The shelter director made a call. That call was the breakthrough the FBI needed. John Allen Muhammad wasn't your average criminal. Born John Williams, he converted to Islam in the mid-1980s and changed his name. He served honorably in the Gulf War, trained as a marksman, and later became deeply paranoid and anti-government. In 2001, after a bitter custody battle with his ex-wife, he kidnapped his 3 children and fled. He had lost everything: his family, his home, his stability. And somewhere in that spiral, he met Malvo. What followed was grooming, manipulation, and the construction of a deadly ideology, one that gave Muhammad a twisted sense of purpose and Malvo a father figure who taught him to kill. With Malvo's identity in hand, authorities searched for any vehicles associated with him and Muhammad. That's when it emerged: a 1990 blue Chevrolet Caprice registered to Muhammad. A bolo, "Be on the lookout," was immediately issued. The nation's highways became surveillance traps. News stations urged civilians to stay alert. Then, a call. October 24th, 2002, the takedown at Rest Stop 52. At 3:15 a.m., police received a report from a trucker who had stopped to rest at a roadside lot in Myersville, Maryland. He noticed a suspicious vehicle matching the Caprice description. Officers quietly moved in. The car's windows were fogged. Inside, they saw 2 figures sleeping, one in the front seat, one in the trunk area. They called in backup. SWAT surrounded the vehicle. And at 3:19 a.m., with weapons drawn, they arrested John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo without a single shot fired. It was over. After 23 days of terror, 17 victims, and a multi-state manhunt, the snipers were in custody. The nation exhales. The relief was overwhelming. People wept on sidewalks. Gas stations reopened their curtains. Schools returned to normal schedules. A region that had been gripped by psychological torture was finally free to breathe again. But as the investigation deepened, what emerged from the darkness was even more chilling than anyone expected. Inside the Caprice, investigators discovered a hole cut into the trunk near the license plate, just large enough for the muzzle of a rifle to protrude. The back seat had been modified so one person could crawl in, lie flat, and shoot undetected. There were maps, ammo boxes, and a Bushmaster XM15 rifle, used in nearly all of the murders. It was a mobile assassination chamber, constructed with precision, used with military discipline, and driven by cold-blooded intent. As Muhammad and Malvo were interrogated, the true horror emerged. The DC sniper spree was only the beginning. Muhammad's ultimate goal? To cause maximum chaos, assassinate public figures, and extort the US government into sending him $10 million. With that money, he planned to set up a training camp, where he and Malvo would recruit and train dozens of child snipers to continue the killing spree across America. This wasn't random. It was phase 1 of a horrifying long-term plan. We were supposed to keep going, Malvo later confessed. This was just the start. A child molded into a murderer. A soldier turned domestic terrorist. A nation brought to its knees. But justice was just beginning, and what came next would shock even seasoned prosecutors. They weren't ghosts. They weren't phantoms. They were right there, hiding in plain sight, behind a rifle in the trunk of a car. By mid-October 2002, after nearly a month of psychological warfare, the pressure on the investigators, the media, and the terrified public had reached a breaking point. Police were under intense scrutiny. People no longer stopped at gas stations without ducking. Kids were kept home from school. Grocery runs became timed missions. America was being held hostage, not by an army, not by an ideology, but by 2 men in a car. And then, everything changed. The note behind the scene. On October 19th, a man was shot outside a Ponderosa steakhouse in Ashland, Virginia. The bullet wound looked familiar. Same caliber, same randomness. But this time, the sniper left something behind. A message, a tarot card, the death card ominously scrawled with the words, "Dear policeman, I am God. Do not release to the press." It wasn't just a taunt. It was communication. The snipers were now speaking directly, and soon they would make a mistake. Just days before, on October 14th, 13-year-old Aaron Brown was shot outside his middle school in Bowie, Maryland. Miraculously, he survived. At the scene, the snipers left behind a note, 4 pages, sealed in a plastic bag, demanding $10 million in exchange for stopping the attacks. It instructed authorities to call a phone number, a number tied to a stolen credit card in Montgomery, Alabama. Montgomery police quickly linked that credit card to a past shooting in Alabama, one with a shell casing left behind. A fingerprint was recovered from that casing. It came back to Lee Boyd Malvo, the names behind the nightmare. Malvo wasn't working alone. Investigators traced him to a man named John Allen Muhammad, a Gulf War veteran with a history of violence, custody disputes, and a growing sense of disenfranchisement from the world. Muhammad had taken Malvo under his wing like a surrogate son. But their bond was built not on love. It was rooted in control, manipulation, and shared rage. What followed was an all-out manhunt. The psychological veil was lifted. The phantoms had names. And now, a vehicle. A dark blue 1990 Chevrolet Caprice. Registered to Muhammad. The silent trap. By October 24, 2002, the FBI had issued an alert for the Caprice. Around 3:15 a.m., a truck driver parked at a rest stop off I-70 in Myersville, Maryland, noticed a vehicle matching the description. It was parked awkwardly. Inside, 2 men sleeping. A call was made. In minutes, federal agents surrounded the rest stop. No gunfire. No chase. When officers quietly opened the doors, they found Malvo and Muhammad asleep. In the trunk, carefully rigged, was a Bushmaster .223 rifle, mounted for long-range shooting. The hole had been drilled just beneath the car's license plate. The terror was over, or so it seemed. John Allen Muhammad was tried in Virginia. He showed no remorse, no guilt. He was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. On November 10, 2009, he was executed by lethal injection. Malvo's fate was more complicated. 17 at the time of the crimes, his age sparked legal and ethical debates. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Over time, he spoke publicly, revealing how Muhammad manipulated him, controlled him, used him like a weapon. "I was a monster. I did monstrous things. But I was made that way," Malvo later said in an interview. The physical wounds healed. But America would never forget. Gas stations installed tarps to shield customers. Schools enforced new lockdown drills. Police began training for mobile sniper detection. The paranoia, the helplessness, it redefined how the country saw mass violence. The sniper attacks weren't just murders. They were a blueprint for terror, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers come not with warning signs, but from the silence between shots. What do you think drove John Allen Muhammad to orchestrate this reign of terror? Was Malvo a willing accomplice or a manipulated child? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss part 6. Where we break down the psychological profiles of both killers and explore how the justice system handled this complex, haunting case. This is True Crime Hub, where the shadows have stories. Stay curious and stay safe.